Hello, scholars, and welcome back. Our focus in social studies this week is cultures and traditions in our country. Our learning targets for this week are as follows. I can describe how diversity in communities contributes to the richness of our culture. There is another learning target coming up later on in the lesson. So this is the learning target for the first portion of the lesson. In the United States, Thanksgiving is a day when families in the United States eat turkey. Many cultures, people from many parts of the world come to the United States to live. They bring their cultures with them. All of these cultures make up American culture. Why are there so many cultures in the United States? In this portion, use the information from the text in order to respond to the question. Make sure that you respond in a complete sentence. You can include background information that you already knew, along with information from the text. That's the part that's most important. Battle of Puebla. Long ago, France tried to occupy part of Mexico. On May 5th, 1862, a small Mexican army fought a big French army at the Battle of Puebla. The Mexican army won the battle. And this is why we have Cinco de Mayo. Every year, people in Albuquerque have a festival or celebration to remember the bravery of the Mexican army. It is called Cinco de Mayo, which means May 5th. Mariachi bands play music, dancers wear colorful costumes. So, what does Cinco de Mayo celebrate? Use the information from this slide and this slide to help you with your response. New Orleans, Louisiana. Long ago, people from different cultures settled in New Orleans. They brought music with them from Africa, France, Spain, Ireland, and Germany. African American songs mixed with other kinds of music to become jazz. Summarize how jazz was created. Use information from this text to help you with your response. Jazz. Jazz is a part of community life in New Orleans. It is played at baseball games, dances, and funerals. This tradition continues today. How do you know that jazz is a big part of community life in New Orleans? Use information from this slide and this slide to help you with your response. Mardi Gras. Every spring, people visit New Orleans to attend Mardi Gras. This celebration begins with a parade. Jazz musicians march down the streets while people clap and cheer. Here's another tradition, Chinese New Year. Each January or February, people celebrate the Chinese New Year. People from all over San Francisco go to the Chinese New Year parade. Marching bands play music. People dress in colorful costumes. A special dragon is carried down the street by more than 100 people. How are Mardi Gras and the Chinese New Year alike and different? So use information from these two slides for Chinese New Year and this slide for Mardi Gras to compare and contrast. Tell what's alike and what's different about the two of them. And now, here's our next learning target. We're going to switch gears and talk more about the American tradition and how our stories are passed down from generation to generation in the American culture. So our learning target is as follows. I can describe how our national heritage can be passed on and shared through stories, songs, and folk tales. Fact or fiction? Over time, American stories are shared by many people. Some stories have facts or parts that are true. Some have parts that are fiction or make believe. A folk tale is a story from long ago about the lives of real people. Read these folk tales about three famous Americans. The first one is Davy Crockett. He was born in a cabin in Tennessee in 1786. As a boy, he worked hard to buy a horse and become a great bear hunter. He grew up to be a soldier and a government leader. The next individual is Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed got his name because he carried sacks of apple seeds wherever he went. His real name was John Chapman. Johnny planted many apple trees across the country. He wanted people to have enough food to eat. That's just so responsible and so kind-hearted of him. And then finally, Betsy Ross. Betsy Ross made her living by sewing. One day in 1776, General George Washington, the leader of the American army, visited her. He asked Betsy to sew the first American flag. Betsy made a flag with 13 stars and stripes, one for each American colony. Remember, before they were states, they were colonies. And you probably recognize the name George Washington. General George Washington became President George Washington of the United States. We move from the folk tales to the tall tales. Tall tale is a story that starts off sounding true, but is mostly fiction. Read the tall tales and think about what parts are fiction. A tall tale is a folk tale with unbelievable exaggerations told as if it were true and meant to be humorous. Paul Bunyan is the first tall tale we will share. When Paul Bunyan was a baby, he was so big that he ate 40 bowls of oatmeal each day. Think about how much oatmeal you eat and how much you're able to eat, and think about whether or not this is feasible. Paul had a giant blue ox named Babe. He and Babe stomped around Minnesota as they played. Their footprints were huge. The holes filled up rain and made 10,000 lakes. Think about which parts of this story are things that could happen and things that might be a slight exaggeration. Next story, Pecos Bill. Stories say that Pecos Bill was the best cowboy to ever live. He had a horse that no one else could ride. One day there was a tornado. Pecos Bill jumped on it. He did not let go until the tornado died down to nothing. That is how people got the idea for rodeo riding. But instead of tornadoes, cowboys ride horses. And then finally, John Henry. There have been songs and books written about a railroad worker named John Henry. Some say that he was bigger and taller than any other man around. John Henry used his hammer to chip away at rocks so that a big tunnel could be built. With a hammer in each hand, he built the tunnel all by himself. All right, so here's some questions about each. Minnesota is called the land of 10,000 lakes. How does the story of Paul Bunyan suggest those lakes were made? So you go back to the Paul Bunyan slide to respond. Rodeo riding is a sport where people ride wild horses or bulls. It is hard not to fall off. How is this like Pecos Bill riding the tornado? And finally, the connection with John Henry. Can one person build a big tunnel alone with hammers? Why? Now remember, in each response, you can give some personal or some background information. That's fine. But the most important part is to use the text information because that's what is going to be the connection with everyone. Everyone is not going to have that background knowledge that you may have, but everyone can go back to the text and share evidence from the text to support their thinking. Looking forward to hearing your responses to these questions and hope you have learned something and enjoyed some news stories.